Hello and welcome to the Hungry Country Boss Show. I am your host Grayson, and tonight we have a pretty special debate. We're having a debate between myself, who is a neoconservative on foreign policy, and my competitor, who is an anarcho-communist. I think is that how you would define yourself?
Yeah, basically.
All right, so I'll let the my competitor give his opening statement, and then we can get on to the bread and butter of the debate.
So basically, you just want me to define my foreign policy, basically?
Yeah, that's what we.
All right. So basically, my philosophy when it comes to foreign policy, I'm anti-intervention. I'm pretty anti-war. At all costs, basically. I believe war destabilizes a nation more than anything else, and I believe in abolishing the CIA. I believe the CIA is a terrorist organization more than anything. They're the reason that Latin America is destabilized ever since the 1940s and onward. So yeah, that's basically my brief synopsis of my foreign policy beliefs.
All right, well, we're going to get a very interesting discussion. My foreign policy is obviously I'm very interventionist, very anti-Iran, anti-CCP, anti-Russia. I'm basically my enemies are what some socialists are usually socialist nations, but not always. I know socialists can be very democratic too. I don't particularly like socialism, but I'm willing to work with a socialist nation as long as they're willing to work with us. And I believe heavily in the Jean Kirkpatrick doctrine, which states that sometimes a pro-American dictator is better than a pro-Russia, back then it was pro-Soviet dictator. So that's my brief synopsis. And
so yeah,
I'll let you kind of start this off. Whoever you want to start this off, I'll start off with a round of questions.
All right. So me to just go, I guess.
Yeah. No, if you want me to go, it doesn't matter.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I guess my question to you is that you say this is what I'm getting from your opening statement. You said the CIA was a terrorist organization. What specifically terrorist involvement would you say would fit terrorism?
Well, Operation Condor, and thankfully the vetoed Operation Northwoods, where the CIA was planning on, false flag operations against the United States, killing civilians and blaming it on the Cubans as an excuse to go to war with Cuba and oust Fidel Castro for pretty much no reason other than them being scared of Fidel Castro being friends with the Soviet Union. I'll clarify to say that I'm not exactly fond of the Soviet Union or China. I just think that the U.S. planning to kill its own civilians as a justification for war is immoral. In Latin America, especially because they were already pretty destabilized as it was, and then they, the sort of elected leaders that didn't fit the U.S. Policy in oil. They nationalized a lot of their oil industry, and the U.S. didn't like that, so they planned coups d'etats and they installed military dictators that killed civilians. Pinochet most infamously dropped people out of helicopters into bodies of water, murdered civilians in soccer stadiums. And I basically just think that the CIA served no purpose. And also the Patriot Act, just spying on its civilians for pretty much no reason. So, yeah.
Well, I can actually agree with you on the Patriot Act. That's why I actually disagree with the neoconservatives. I don't. For a slightly different reason, I also believe it's very ineffective in actually stopping terrorists. But I will push back on that CIA thing because, obviously, the CIA does more than just sting operations in South America. So I don't they collect data they are the Central Intelligence Agency. Their most foremost mission is to established intelligence. And I mean, the when I and the thing with like Chile is that again I would refer that to the Jean Kirkpatrick doctrine. Allende was a pro-Soviet president, and I just don't really think that having a pro-Soviet ally in South America would have been good to us for the fight on communism. You would have had way more insurgencies. We already had the insurgency in Colombia versus with the FARC versus the Colombian government. I just don't see a. I just think that while Pinochet was obviously a terrible leader, I would have preferred him to Allende, and given the fact that after he left, by the way, he left democratically after a referendum, and after that, Chile experienced a great economic growth, which led them to be one of the most prosperous nations on earth. And that goes back to the Jean Kirkpatrick doctrine, because they reformed a lot easier than they probably would have under Allende.
Yeah, and I'll say that sometimes ousting a leader is a good thing, but I honestly think that putting someone like Pinochet in power over a person who was democratically elected by the government, or not the government, by the people of that country, if say we'll just use Russia as an example. Say Russia installs a leader in America, and would you say that that would be a good idea if it was preserving Russian interests?
Well, I see that as a false equivalency, and I'll explain that as I see America as being a far more bastion of freedom and democracy than the current Russian system. Russia has never been a free nation. It's always been under the reign of either a weak government or a strongman dictator, like we see now in Vladimir Putin, who, while there are technically elections in Russia, we all kind of know they're false.
That's true. Although, but when you have to sort of look at it from a different perspective, because when you live in America, you sort of, get the perspective that, America has the best interests in the world, and, we can do whatever because we know what's best. But, the people in Chile democratically elected their leader, and I'm sure they didn't exactly enjoy having a foreign country come and install a leader that murdered civilians and, destabilize the country for a period of years.
Well, I'll honestly admit I am not so sure if Pinochet was a good idea, because there was another election coming up, and Allende's approval was in the toilet during that time, hence why the coup actually started. But the issue with that is that there were signs that Allende may have been turning into a dictator. So I wouldn't have exactly necessarily think that it would have remained democratic under Allende either.
Mm-hmm. And but Chile's not the only instance of this happening. You have Paraguay, you have Brazil, you have a lot of these other Latin American countries that the exact same thing happened. And pretty much in every instance, the leader was democratically elected. And, most of the time, it wasn't an instance of a person becoming a dictator. It was more an instance of them not preserving U.S. Relations when it relates to oil or trade. And the CIA, and also they ousted leaders simply because they saw a communist country in Latin America being a threat to the U.S. Even though communist countries, or the ideology of communism, is very anti-imperialism. So if the U.S. is afraid of these countries, I feel like it's not really it's not a good idea to rather bomb the shit out of them, and rather come to a table and make an agreement.
As I said, I don't think that if a democratic socialist takes command, that's not the worst thing. Like, I don't really care Morales of what, it's not Morales anymore, it's Acri, I think. I don't really care that they control Bolivia. Bolivia is not even that major of a nation. So, but the thing is, you kind of gotta realize that this was the Cold War. The Soviets were doing this in Eastern Europe. In 1947, for instance, when the Soviets rigged the election and the Communist Party of Hungary still lost. That's how much they did not want communism. Yet, the Soviet Union still forced it down through shenanigans with the right-wing oppositions. They replaced all their leaders with communists, and then that allowed Rashkutsky to basically consolidate his power.
Yeah, and going back to the point I made a while ago, where I'm very anti-Soviet Union. Basically, I don't view the Soviet Union as communist. I view them as authoritarian capitalists, which is what they were. They were state capitalist countries where the government controlled all production, which is the complete antithesis of communism. And I think the having obviously installing leaders of your own in other countries is bad. That's sort of the point of what I'm making. And I don't agree at all with what the Soviet Union did in Eastern Europe. And, obviously most of Eastern Europe did not agree.
Oh, do you want to ask a question now since I asked mine?
Yeah. So what do you think is the ethical way, rather other than installing a leader of your own that agrees with the country, then sorry, I need to rephrase the question. What do you think is a better way to get countries to work with you, other than planning a coup and killing their leaders?
Well, there are two types of nations that would have different responses. You have basically neutral nations, and then you would have nationalist states and states that usually fall with the Russian spear, though those are usually in China's spear, but those usually overlap. So for neutral states, states like Nigeria, Morocco, well, not Morocco, they're US ally, but Gabon, Congo, my solution to them is to basically create economic deals with them that will benefit them, help build infrastructure in the country, and also counter China's investment plans in Africa. The issue with nationalists and pro-Russian states sometimes is that they're a lot harder to work with. Like 2003, I don't think there was any way we were ever going to get Saddam Hussein to stop his genocide. So invasion was the only choice. And you may argue, well, it violated international law, but also a lot of the international community joined the U.S., so it's a kind of hard to convict the like 30, 40 nations that joined in.
Mm-hmm. And I will say that I think America went to Iraq based on a lie, and it was a lie saying that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction.
Well, he did. He used them. He used them in the Alan Fong campaign against the Kurds.
Or maybe it wasn't Iraq. I'm thinking of I swear it was Iraq. Maybe it's not Iraq, but some country that the United States invaded, that the leader did not have weapons of mass destruction.
No, I know that's a claim that they make about the Iraq War, is that Saddam didn't have nukes, and he didn't have nukes because, well, Israel blew up their nuclear reactor that prevented them from getting nukes, but also he did have WMDs. He had chemical weapons. We know this. He used them on the Kurds.
Mm. So yeah, I'll concede that. The premise. Sorry, I forgot what we were talking about. I went on a different train of thought, and now I lost it.
I think it was on Iraq or something. Yeah, Iraq.
Oh yeah, so we were talking about building up infrastructure in other countries. So would you say that socialist countries such as Cuba, building infrastructure in other countries is a bad thing? Would you want to stop that, or would you?
I want caveats if we're going to build infrastructure in Cuba. I want them to basically no longer say other political parties can't run and all parties have to be endorsed by the Communist Party. I don't want to really work with one-party states unless it's an absolute necessity.
Mm-hmm. I think I can't remember the year, but Cuba is a big reason for why Bolivia is like prospering. I guess it's sort of a subjective term in this case, but Cuba helped Bolivia so much, and they improved their literacy rates, they improved their health rates, so much so that the Che Guevara and Fidel Castro are regarded as heroes in Bolivia, and they have like pictures of them all over. It's not even in a propaganda sense; it's more of a these people helped develop our country, and I believe the United States didn't like that very much, so they tried to assassinate Fidel Castro over 600 times.
I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the Bolivia campaign that Cuba did, and while it is true they did do some good things in Bolivia, they did a lot of terrible things in Angola and in Ethiopia. They support the FARC, so Cuba was a net negative, arguably, in world politics. They just had that one good example, which is Bolivia, and even then, it wasn't necessarily because this is something that they never seem to mention. Before Morales actually took power, there was already a rise in people leaving poverty in Bolivia. It just happened also under Morales, but I can't think of the data off the top of my head though.
No worries. So the I forgot what I was going to say. Never mind.
Well, you mind if I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead. We'll just take turns.
What was your thought on the U.S. funding of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 80s?
That is not a topic I am educated on. So if you will enlighten me, I will give you my limited opinion of it based on the education I have.
Well, I don't know. I'll give you what. Basically, in the 1980s in Afghanistan, there was a dispute between more religious Muslims in the country and like the communist government that was oppressing their religious liberties. And so the Mujahideen was formed in Afghanistan to fight the Soviet Union. And they had lots of fighters that came along. And they defeated the Mujahideen defeated the Soviets, but the Soviets also committed several war crimes in the country. There was a couple massacres that happened of like hundreds of people. There was also the fact they tried to prevent villages from having food that were rebel controlled. And the only controversy I hear with the Mujahideen is that some of the Mujahideen fighters later formed the Taliban, and another Mujahideen fighter happened to be Osama bin Laden.
I think I know what we're talking about. Are we talking about how Reagan funded the groups in the Middle East that eventually became ISIS? Is that what we're talking about?
No, this is Afghanistan. They didn't become ISIS. They did. Some of them became Taliban and Al Qaeda fighters, though. Also, a lot of them weren't Al Qaeda and Taliban fighters. The leader of the Mujahideen spent years trying to fight these people. Osama bin Laden actually killed the leader of the Mujahideen 2 days before 9/11.
All right. Well, that is not an event I was aware of. But to what extent did the U.S. fund like the group?
Well, they gave them a lot. They gave them a lot of weapons, specifically. They gave them stuff to shoot down helicopters, and because before then the Afghan military had like guns from like the 50s that could barely shoot a few rounds before they fell apart. And after the U.S., they had all this advanced weaponry, which happened. Some of it did fall under the Al Qaeda and Taliban rebels as well.
Well, I will say that I am pretty much against arms dealing pretty much in every instance. I view arms dealing in other countries as an evil, because we're giving these people weapons of war, and when Obama gave weapons to the Middle East, and then now like terror groups are using them, you never know whose hands those weapons are gonna end up in the future. And
yes, but I'll let you finish if you want.
no, that was it basically.
I was just going to say, what was I going to say actually? Okay, this is what I was going. The argument I would push back on that is that we did do the arms deal because it was the Soviet army. They were committing war crimes in the nation. What are we supposed to do? Just let them die? Not do anything to help them? It's like, and yes, some of them did form the Taliban, but what was the alternative? Let the commies have Afghanistan, which would empower the Soviet Union, because the Soviet-Afghan War was one of the leading causes of their collapse.
Well, I'm not very well versed in this topic. I don't know much about Afghanistan, but I still, and I'll agree that war crimes are bad, and any country committing war crimes needs to be like told to knock it off, basically. I view war as a last resort at any possible moment, and it's possible that that was the last resort to sell arms to the Afghan rebels. But obviously I don't know much about the topic, so.
Right, so now it's your time to ask me a question if you want.
Yeah. So when you invited me on the debate, the topic that you had told me we were discussing is the ethicality of U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah.
And basically, I want to know your opinion on, I'm very opposed to the CIA, so we're going to be talking about the CIA in this question. Psychological terror on citizens of, other countries, such as, I can't forget the country really quick. Let me find it. The Philippines. The CIA, they started urban legends in the Philippines around the 1950s about a vampire that was living in the mountains, and then they would kidnap Filipino civilians, poke holes in their neck, and then hang them upside down to make people in the country afraid, so they would be less strong when the CIA would go in and regime change the country. And
I am not aware of that, so I wouldn't be able to give a good answer.
Yeah, but just things like that, and the CIA using advanced torture techniques in Guantanamo Bay, and just things like that. What is your opinion on is torture necessary, or I don't know, basically?
I would argue yes, but don't just go crazy on it. Like, I'm against what they did in the Hanoi Hilton, North Vietnam, torturing American POWs to the extent they did. I'm probably more for psychological torture. I mean, I don't know much about torture methods, so I can't say anything. I don't know, maybe make them watch Samantha Bee.
That'd be a good torture method.
Oh, actually, I might be against that. I think that violates the Geneva Convention.
Yeah, you're right. That might be against section something in the Geneva Conventions. But yeah, I forget who it was or what country they came from, but I believe it was the first person the CIA actually ever tortured, if I'm remembering correctly. They had tried 8 different methods of torture to try and get this guy to talk. And, they had kept him in a box for, multiple days. They had chained him in uncomfortable positions and starved him of water. They put him in a box, chained to a bucket for days. And, they were never able to get anything out of him. And then when they set him free, I believe he wrote a book about it, or he either wrote a book or he became a whistleblower. One of the two. But, the CIA and military agencies and intelligence agencies use torture tactics like that, I would argue, probably to this day. And I just view that as horrific, and I don't think the U.S. should be involving.
I'm not really pro torture I don't know if you've heard the story about the German World War II interrogator. He basically, instead of torturing, he acted friendly towards the people he was going to get information out of by like inviting them to a movie or for a cup of coffee. And that was actually he was actually the most effective World War II interrogator. So yeah, sometimes being good cop can work. It's just sometimes being bad cop also has to be done.
Mhm. You know, I wouldn't view that as torture. I think
Yeah,
good cop is always should always be the first course of action, and I think and not to praise Nazi generals or anything, but I think that that method of information gathering is a lot more effective than chaining someone in a box for 10 days.
yeah. Anyway, whose question is it to ask a question?
Your
I
turn.
think it's, oh yeah, okay. Wait, so I guess my question would be is that um what exactly is your method of I guess what you would say is that is there a case where you would support a preemptive war? It's like not a defensive war, but a preemptive war. I.e., you fire the first bullet.
Well, uh, preemptive war, I think, is only justifiable if there is hard evidence of a major military strike against your country, and uh, like if we had, or we did actually, we had advanced knowledge of 9/11 and that it was going to happen. So if but that wasn't a government, or maybe it was a government funded thing. But the if you have pre-existing knowledge and hard evidence of a country planning to attack you, if you cannot avert the attack in any other way, launching a preemptive strike would be justifiable in that uh, instance. However, it should be a last resort.
So if you don't mind, I will kind of want to dig a little deeper on that to a more specific case. And it's actually happening right now. You probably heard in the news that Russia is building up like 100,000 troops, more than 100,000 in Ukraine. Ukraine is, well, it's not technically an ally of the US, though that we have close relations. Would you say in that case, since it's looking like Russia is going to attack Ukraine, would you want to make any response to that before they do? Yeah.
Well, considering that we are not Ukraine, I would first ask Ukraine
Or,
what they want, like if they require assistance or if there's any other countries that are willing to help. But I don't believe that we should strike Russia because they're not going to attack us, as far as I know. But yes, I have heard about the Russian Ukraine escalation going on right now. And I see the question in the comments right now about the genocide, and I assume you're referring to the Chinese genocide going on in I forget the name of the city, but I would say that if we have evidence of a genocide, that would be a justifiable case. But there was a panel discussion about this a long time ago, or actually not a long time ago, it was pretty recently, that we don't really have hard soil evidence of a genocide in China. And I will say that I am not pro-China. I believe China is a brutal dictatorship. But I believe we need harder evidence in order to justify going to war with China, considering that they are, developing their military a lot faster than ours, and they're capable of, uh, uh, technological warfare at a much greater extreme than we are. So I believe we need to be absolutely sure before we do anything extreme that could possibly be a mistake.
okay, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah. Is it my turn to ask a question now, or do you
Yeah,
want to
it is.
further that? Okay. So are you pro sanctions on, or is there a certain type of sanction that you prefer, or is just pro sanction across?
Well, sanctions should be done, but I feel like decoupling from nations is a lot more effective. Like, I think I personally think we should move out almost every asset we have in China and put them into the United States. Or if we can't, we should put them in nations like the Philippines, Vietnam, India, Indonesia. And see, here's the thing. I told you this. I am not free trade like a lot of neoconservatives are. I'm a protectionist, at least for national security reasons, and for some moral reasons, but mostly for national security reasons. So I would say that I want to decouple more than sanctions, but I am not opposed to sanctions depending on how effective they would be. Like, I would say Venezuela's oil sanctions are pretty effective in trying to get the government to lessen the burden on their people.
Mhm. Well, I personally am pretty anti-sanction across the board. There is one, type of sanction that I am, mildly in favor of. But like an economic study done by, I forget what the website was. It was Brookings, showed that sanctions actually hurt the citizens of a country more than they hurt the leaders, because you're, depriving them of resources. You're not, trading
But
with
at
the.
least I will say, at least with Venezuela, at least we can make the case that we are sending aid to the citizens, which coincidentally the Maduro government does not like. I wonder why.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly pro Maduro. I believe Maduro is probably a bad guy. There have been better leaders of Venezuela than Maduro. Um, but I believe sanctioning specific government figures is more effective than sanctioning an entire country.
I don't know if we actually do sanction. I mean, from what I read, it's actually a lot of the sanctions on Venezuela are on the state-owned oil company too.
Yeah.
Which, Venezuela is very reliant on oil. There are other reasons why Venezuelans are having this economic growth, other than the fact that they have the sanctions and the fact that their economic decisions have not been the best in the last 20 years, is because oil prices are usually falling. And that's in part due to thanks to Saudi Arabia, who has been having a lot more oil in recent years because they can produce it the cheapest.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was basically my question. I just want to know your thoughts on sanctions.
Okay, well, I guess I'll ask you this. I know you're an anarcho-communist, so I guess you don't really believe in the government too much.
Yeah, not quite.
Well, I guess this is usually the question that anarchists always get asked the most, but how would you defend yourself from an actual state government attacking you? Like, say, just hypothetically, if China wanted to take over your anarcho-communist United States because there is no standing military.
Well, I would say that ideally, within my ideal society, there would be no governments at all in the world. But in this specific instance, I think arming the people is always a good idea. That's why I'm a very pro Second Amendment. I believe, I believe in little regulations here and there, because we live in the 21st century and we can't just stick to what we knew hundreds of years ago. But I'm against the banning of sale or manufacture of pretty much any weapon. So I believe that when a state tries to impose its beliefs on say the people in a country, and those people are armed and they're willing to defend their way of life, more people will rise up and fight their oppressors rather than just lay down and take it.
So basically, when the tree starts speaking American.
basically.
So you have a question?
I'm trying to. I had one, and then I had to think really hard for that. So, do you think that there is a country that we need to, more heavily be involved in? Basically, is my question.
Oh boy, this is going to be good. Basically, I mean, obviously, we're pulling out of Afghanistan. I don't agree with that for multiple reasons. I want to make sure that we have a unified government so we don't pull out and then suddenly this government's unable to defend itself. Because right now, we don't actually have too many troops in Afghanistan. Like, low key, we actually have more troops in Italy than we do in Afghanistan right now. In Iraq, that's a little more complicated, but for the purpose of countering Iran, I would want to be involved in. And this may sound like a weird one. I kind of want to send more troops to Thailand because of the Myanmar crisis. I want to be able to put pressure on this junta to degrade violence. And at this point, it's looking like the only country we can actually work with to actually get Myanmar on the right path is ironically Thailand, which itself is not a very democratic nation, but compared to its neighbor, it's obviously a bastion of democracy. But
I somewhat agree with you on the Myanmar crisis. I believe that the people didn't want those leaders. They're basically a military dictatorship, I would call it. And I believe the fighting has been going on for a long time or recently, I guess, because of the people don't want the government.
So the fighting in Myanmar, that's been happening since the 1940s because of how unstable the country really is.
Oh yeah, but like the recent conflict, right?
Yeah, the recent one.
Yeah.
You have to be more specific with Myanmar.
Yeah, you're right. There's like so many conflicts going on in that region. But yeah, that was. I just wanted to know your thoughts on if there's any countries we need to be looking at more closely.
Well, I guess I'll ask you this. I know you're not an interventionist, but I will ask this. I just want to know: would you say that America working with dictators to achieve a better goal later on is always a bad thing, or do you think there are exceptions to work with dictators even?
You had to be more specific.
I guess I'll say just Saudi Arabia, the monarchy of Saudi Arabia.
Mm-hmm. Well, it would have to depend on the issue and depend on the country, because I believe, as much of a critic I am of Donald Trump, I hate that motherfucker. But I believe he did good things by establishing a relationship with Kim Jong Un to ease tension between our countries. But then he sort of made it worse by egging him on a little bit. I think establishing a friendly relationship with any country is good because it eases tension that could be caused, and it may help you in the future to ease a conflict down. So say Saudi Arabia and another one of our friendly nations are in a conflict, say something similar to Russia and Ukraine. We could maybe sit down with Saudi Arabia and talk with them and say, hey, now that we're friends, we can maybe come to an agreement with this. But it also, you have to think about it, because if you're something like, let's use Hitler as an example. If you're like Hitler, I know it's an extreme example, but that's the most prominent one. I don't think having a relationship with someone like that is a desirable. I think we need to be able to make sure we can have relationships with countries, but not just any country under the sun,
Well, so I guess to add on to that a little, so I'm guessing you since you mentioned that you'd be willing to work with Saudi Arabia in case of a unstable nation. So would you say that you would actually support the Hadi and Saudi Arabia intervention against the Houthi terrorist organizations in Yemen?
Well, I don't believe that the U.S. should be involved in Yemen, but I would say that supporting uh, having a relationship with a government doesn't exactly entail being involved in their conflicts. Um, like I just think that American drone strikes and American involvement in Yemen especially has probably killed more civilians than we would like, especially drone strikes.
And then this is going to sound a little assholish to me, but I would actually say it's the Houthi terrorists that kill the most civilians.
Well, but like yeah, they killed civilians, but more than we would like with our drone strikes, of course. But
Yeah,
obviously, civilian deaths should be a zero in pretty much any war possible. I think drone strikes massively increase the chance of civilian deaths.
actually, not really, because compared to the formal method, they're actually a lot more better versus carpet bombing. And infamously in Vietnam, napalm, it's obviously better than those two.
Yeah. I think because when Trump got into office, and I think it was 2018, he got rid of the regulations where you need to provide a death count for a drone strike. He got rid of the regulations to say that you need to what's the word? Announce a drone strike, basically the number of drone strikes. That's what I'm looking for. So we don't have any like evidence past about 2018, 2019 of how many exactly drone strikes that the U.S. has launched and how many civilians it's killed, because every time a drone strike kills somebody, it's counted as an enemy combatant, because it's too hard to verify whether or not it was an enemy or not. And I believe that we need to have a way better method of having a controlled strike on an area than just claiming everything's an enemy combatant.
Okay. Also, I just want to make this pretty clear. I'm not pushing back as much as I would normally, just because, like, if you were debating a different neocon like Kevin Cassidy, he would have pushed back a lot more than I would have. I just don't push back too much.
Yeah, and we probably agree on quite a bit of things when it comes to foreign policy. Like anti-USSR, anti Chinese dictator, anti-North Korea, probably.
Yeah, we just have different ways of going about it, and I prefer not guns blazing, but kind of guns blazing.
Mm-hmm. And I guess that sort of ties into my next question. Do you think the benefits of invading, we'll use invading as a word, invading North Korea or attacking North Korea better than the drawbacks?
Well, here's the thing. I don't trust North Korea, and my thing with North Korea is that they are beyond the point where their nuclear capacity is actually for self-defense at this point. So that makes us wonder, what are they going to do with their nukes? And there's a few in the neoconservative circle that North Korea is planning to build enough nukes to blackmail the US. And so I want to avoid blackmail with them. I want to destroy their nukes, essentially. Obviously, search and destroy nukes. Unlike someone else, though. Someone has proposed nuking North Korea. I am not for nuking North Korea. I'm for precision strikes on their nuclear assets. Because I obviously don't believe that a mass nuclear genocide is ultimately the good idea.
Definitely, and that's something you and I can agree on. Nuclear war is never something I believe that should ever happen, and we need to ensure that nukes are not launched. And one of the only things I said before that I'll commend Donald Trump on is establishing a somewhat friendly relationship with North Korea, and that's sort of something that I'm critical of President Biden on. Being more cutthroat with North Korea, because being hostile towards North Korea is not going to get us anywhere. It's just only going to make Congress.
I would disagree with that. And also, I think Trump's best decision was killing Soleimani, he's the general of the largest state sponsor in the Middle East. I think killing him was ultimately a good thing.
Yeah, I think I'm mixed on that. I think it was a good idea. I think doing it without congressional approval was the riskier thing, because that was also a risky decision, just doing it off the bat, because we could have started a war with Iran, and most of the country doesn't want to go to war with Iran, and I think just doing that without approval from Congress first was his biggest mistake in that decision.
Yeah, I don't know about this whole approval from Congress thing, because this was a point that was brought up by one of my neoconservative friends. He said that if we let Congress decide everything, let's say that Russia fired a bunch of nukes at us, we have 10 hours to shut this down. But in order to stop it, we need to get all the Congress members together. And wait, we have to go on vacation, so we have to set up a Zoom call, and half of them won't show up. It's like, I don't exactly trust Congress to act fast on certain issues.
Well, in that specific case, I think if Russia's launching nukes at us, I believe that would be an instance to go without congressional approval, because we are under direct threat of a nuclear strike. But also, I sort of believe that Congress would be more willing to come back if nukes are getting launched at us. So I'm not sure that's quite a good argument.
Okay, so I think I'm actually out of questions because I can't think of any.
So I'll go back to our first question that we sort of touched on. What do you think is a better alternative to the Patriot Act, something sort of like that? Because we can both agree that stopping terrorism is a good thing, but we can also both agree that the Patriot Act is not the way to do it.
Well, I would say one, fund the FBI more, just because I think the FBI has been a lot more effective at stopping domestic terrorism and foreign terrorism than the Patriot Act has. And also the CIA plays a big role in this too. I know you want to get rid of the CIA, but they can actually be good at collecting data on terrorists and where they are.
Yeah, and the CIA, I forget what statistic it is, but the CIA also, engages in. We know this because of Edward Snowden, his whistleblowing of the CIA spying on civilians, and the CIA also owns a good amount of, or not owns, has a stake in a lot of the companies that write our history books, which is probably the reason that our history books don't teach about a lot of the stuff that we've done around the world. And I believe the CIA having the capability to spy on every civilian is a massive breach of our privacy and our civil liberties. And I believe a better alternative to the Patriot Act is having better immigration, because right now our immigration is sort of it's on some amount of I don't know what's going on with our immigration right now, because we sort of have an immigration system that takes forever to become a citizen, and it leaves people better off, and they feel like their best option is to enter the country illegally. That's a recipe for disaster, basically.
It's kind of ironic, though, how it takes so long to become an immigrant in the U.S. Yet the U.S. is also the easy country to get into, which is ironic.
Because, especially Mexico. No, you're good. I was just going to talk until you had your thing.
Okay, well, I am out of questions, and so if you have any other questions, if not, we can go to final statements.
I don't have any other questions now.
Okay, well, I think this was a good debate. It was a good discussion. I I'm actually kind of glad it feels more good with this because a lot of the neocons versus anarchist debates have always been against anarcho-capitalists and and they've been a lot more crazy than this. Like we've had Iceland doesn't get invaded because it's not based. We've had Rothbard PDFs will stop China. So kind of glad we don't have. It's kind of a relief to talk to an anarchist who's not an ANCAP.
Oh yeah. And I personally don't believe ANCAPs are anarchists, in my personal point of view, because, anarchism is about, getting rid of all unjust hierarchies. And I think capitalism breeds hierarchies. And I think that's completely antithetical to anarchism, but that's a different discussion that we can have another day.
So actually, I do think I have one more point to point out, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I said this once, and I just wonder how you feel about this. Anarchism, technically by its own way of working, has to be hawkish because they have to destroy every state so that one state doesn't destroy the system.
Well, I sort of agree and disagree. I think there's one thing that I will agree with sort of more authoritarian communists on is something called the dictatorship of the proletariat. It's not quite a dictatorship of the sense of the word that we know it, but it's like a group of the citizens in the country that can oversee all, like every citizen of the country, or the group of people, because there would be no country in the certain region, would oversee all aspects of production. So like, agricultural, manufacturing, things like that. And those people would have more influence over, say, one oligarch who wanted to take power. So their influence would be able to, crush any, one person wanting to rise to power. And I think that is probably a more effective way rather than, just having a decentralized mess of people all around that, wouldn't hear of some one person rising to power in a completely different part of the country. Like, I'm in Idaho right now. If we were in an anarchist state with no way of communicating with each other, I wouldn't know about some dictator in the region of Maine who's like, kill everyone there. I wouldn't know about that. So I think there definitely needs to be some sort of leadership. I just don't think a sort of a hierarchical system is the most efficient way.
Okay. And so I guess that we can finally go on to final debate. I think this has been a good debate. Most people were expecting blood sports because obviously the two sides are not the most agreeable. But yeah, I mean, if you ever want to talk again, we can always do that. If you want to talk to a different neocon, I can definitely set you up. So, anyway, that's it. Oh yeah, it's your turn. Sorry.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I enjoyed this discussion. It's always nice to talk to someone from the other side about their opinions, because then you're not stuck in an echo chamber. And I'll definitely research a lot more of the stuff that you talked to me about today, like the Afghanistan thing that we talked about, and I'll have to do some more research into Myanmar. I have a very limited amount of knowledge on that crisis going on right now, so I'll definitely look into that.
And thank you everyone else for watching, and I will see you in the next video.